Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. So today's presentation is entitled ISP Perfect Storm. And excellent customer support involves listening to the customer and being able to act on their particular needs and requirements. Customer support organizations, which are based upon multiple separate and discrete silos, often do not communicate with each other, and it's really not fair that the customer has to spearhead the coordination amongst the various parts of the service provider, and that's what I had to do in this particular case. So it's rare that a script can solve any problem except for the most basic ones. And automated voice assistants are very efficient for the service provider, but they're not at all helpful or respectful of customer time. So this is a story about a real-world experience, and it's a failure of service that occurred with Xfinity Comcast, which impacted one of my customers. So initially, what we wanted to accomplish was a service transition or change of address for our service. And so the customer moved to a new home, and they wanted to leave their old home internet connection active until the old home was sold. And there were a variety of reasons for this, one of which was the fact that the old home had security cameras that they wanted to be able to be recorded. Another reason was they really didn't have the infrastructure set up at the new home. And one of the things that we had taking place was a point-to-point VPN where data was being replicated from the office to the home. And so therefore we didn't want to disrupt that until later on. So what we had here was we had a Netgear CM1000 modem at their old home, and it had MAC address of something, let's just say, ending in 1234, and it was a Ubiquiti Unify Dream Machine, as well as a Unify US24 Power over Ethernet switch, and then a QNAP NAS Model TVS-473. And then at the new home, because they wanted service for the period of time that it was going to take to sell the old residence, they went ahead and acquired an Xfinity Xfi router, and let's just say that its MAC address ends in 5678. And then they had a series of digital set-top boxes for their various TV streaming. So after 30 days, the old home was sold, and then we were going to migrate the equipment to the new home. So I physically moved the equipment from the old address to the new address. We disconnected the Xfinity Xfi router at the new address, and then the connection was verified active at the new address, primarily because we were still in the same service area, and so the MAC address of that CM1000 modem was still valid on the system, came up and was running just fine. So at that point, we went ahead and contacted Xfinity with the customer to terminate the old account at the previous address. And when we did that, we informed them to make sure that the Netgear CM1000 MAC address ending in 1234 was registered as the active device at the new address. So the result was that 24 hours after Xfinity was notified of the service address change and that we were deleting the old service address and instead working entirely with the new service address for the residents, the service goes offline. So the first steps that we did was we contacted Xfinity, and then we were informed, or the customer, I should say, was informed that the modem correctly test, but the technician would need to be dispatched because there was a wiring problem at the residence, despite the fact that internet service had been working there for 30 days. So then Xfinity is informed that the service at the new address was active for 30 days, and that the Netgear modem was active after the move for 24 hours, and I inform Xfinity that the modem must have been mistakenly disabled after the old address account was removed. So now we had to figure out exactly what was wrong. I informed Xfinity that the Netgear CM1000 with the MAC address ending in 1234 must have been mistakenly disabled in their system since the service outage occurred within 24 hours of closing the account at the old address. And Xfinity informed me that the CM1000 is active and that they can test and provision it properly, and that they need to dispatch a service technician because apparently we have a wiring problem. I informed them that the modem can be provisioned and tested, that the wiring is fine, and I can see by the status lights on the modem that the connection is good and both transmit and receive data are working, but there is no data moving over the modem. And furthermore, I had tried to connect a PC directly to the modem, and it never got a DHCP address because there was no data connection. So I asked them to check the old account, and they insist that it is a wiring issue. I pull a spare CM1000 from my inventory, and I call to ask them if it can be provisioned. The technician adds my spare CM1000 to the account and then says that there was no need after all because she can see in the system where the old CM1000 is disabled at the old address, and she's able to now suddenly fix that. So now this is where it really gets interesting. The existing CM1000 disable flag is cleared on the old deleted service address, which the other technicians, and there was more than one of them that we had spoken to, they did not check that. But this new technician was able to discover that fact and was able to clear that flag. Now that we have data on the CM1000 at the new service address, all seems kind of well and fine. So an hour later, we have a service outage at the customer business site. The customer Xfinity residential account and the Xfinity business account are actually two separate account numbers, and they're also at different service addresses. Surely the business service outage is totally unrelated, or is it? So now we have the Xfinity residential connection with the Netgear CM1000 that was moved from the old home. It is now active because they removed the disable flag at the old address, even though the old address had been deleted. Apparently their database tracks old and new addresses, and if it is deleted anywhere in their system, no data moves over that particular modem. And since the MAC address was same at 1234, ending in 1234, that's why we didn't have any data. And that was one of the reasons why I brought a new modem from my spares, assuming that if we had them provision a new MAC address, our problem would go away. But then at the last minute, they discovered that the problem was really that it had been disabled like I had told them. So we've got our Unify Dream Machine, our US24 switch, and our QNAP TVS 473 at the residence. At the business, we have another CM1000, and let's just say that its MAC address ends in 4321, and it's a Ubiquity Unify USG 3P that's been in service for about 5 to 6 years. With the Unify Cloud Key Gen 2 Plus, they have a US 24 PoE switch and a QNAP TS877. So one of the reasons for this configuration is because we have, between the two NASs, we have dataset replication from their office to their home via RTRR, or real-time remote replication, over an OpenVPN site-to-site connection. So now we have a use case example of a service level agreement and outage impact. So the business data connection goes offline within 30 minutes of fixing the home internet connection problem. And this is verified by going to unify.ui.com, which is the cloud site for Ubiquiti, and it indicates that the last time that it saw the USG 3 Pro router was 30 minutes before the time that we looked at it. So the customer contacts Xfinity Business Customer Support. And I might point out that even though the Xfinity residential account and the Xfinity business account have different account numbers and also different account authorizations and verification codes that must be used, somehow the business account rep informs us that the business account has no registered modem associated with it. So I asked them to examine the history, and it turns out that, of course, they discovered that there was a CM1000 at the business address and that it has been in service for more than 5 years, as I had informed them. But they say that the business CM1000 has been moved to the residential account and it's set up as disabled currently. So we're a little curious how that actually happened and why there was any crossover between the two accounts, because as you know, if you call Xfinity or really any ISP service provider, they ask you to go through a long list of verification processes to determine whether or not you're authorized to make any changes to that particular account. So after about an hour, we were able to contact a residential support technician, and the business modem gets removed from the residential account, and that was because the business people had no access to the residential accounts and they could not make that change for us. After this occurs, we're transferred back to Xfinity Business after about another 30 minutes on hold. So at this point, this entire day is getting into, 5 hours or something on the phone. Xfinity Business wants to know the MAC address and the serial number of the Netgear CM1000 that's been in service for the last 5 years at the office. You know, the one that they removed? Okay. So it is 11:30 p.m. and both the customer and I are conferenced from home. Neither of us are at the office location. And so it's not like we can unlock the rack, pick up the modem, and read that information off the bottom of the modem. So on-site and virtual employees are scheduled to arrive at work in less than 8 hours, and we're emphasizing to them that we don't want a business service outage. So Xfinity Business can see the MAC address of the missing modem in their history, but they can't see the serial number, and apparently they cannot add a modem to their system without having both the MAC address and serial number. And I can't even remember when that was true, because I do remember when they had an online web-based capability to swap the modem from a customer perspective, and all you ever had to do is provide a MAC address, and you never had to provide a serial number. So at this point, I'm a little upset, and I tell them it's unacceptable and they're impacting the business. So after about another 15 minutes of being placed on hold alternately and listening to the same hold music, the modem is mysteriously re-provisioned and is back online by some magic that they performed at their end, and we never provided them the serial number. Evidently, they were able to extract that information from the history, as I thought they should have earlier, so all was fine and dandy. Home was online and the office was online. So in summary, I left out one interesting point along the way. You will recall that I picked a CM1000 out of my spares, and went ahead and brought it in. And initially, I was going to get it configured at the house before they ended up finding their mistake that I told them that they had. Well, they ended up adding that modem to the account. The reason I know that is because at one point, not having the serial number, I said, well, can you just kind of fudge in the serial number for the office, for the spare modem into the office modem? And they went and accessed that, and they said, no, that modem is owned by a different customer. Of course, that customer ended up being the residential account. And for some reason now, we kept getting spun back and forth between the business service and the residential service, although the original problem was caused by the residential service turning off the business modem, which should have not been possible by their own governance. In any event, customer time is valuable, and service providers seem to have forgotten this. And Tier 2 support should be accessible by customers who exhibit an expert level of knowledge. And one of the things that I ran into is every time we picked up the phone and initiated a new call with Xfinity support, immediately the first thing the automated assistant would do is it would go out and do a check of the modem. Of course, the modem was up and fine and everything. And then they would say, well, you need to cycle power on your modem. Of course, we weren't right next to these modems, so we couldn't do that. And that was their prerequisite to even being able to get through and talk to a specialist. And my point of view is you should, at that point, be elevated to Tier 2 support once you've already done that governance once. But no, you have to do it every single time. So after more than one call to customer support, Xfinity needs to have basically an expedite queue that allows subsequent calls on the same issue to bypass that initial call screening where the modem is checked that I just described. And if the customer provides a piece of information to Xfinity to initiate service, for example, a modem serial number in this case, this information should be accessible by their technicians and not something where they have to ask the customer for this each and every time, and in particular, especially if the modem has been in service for 5 years. So when an issue has been caused by the ISP, they should take responsibility in solving it rather than forcing the customer through a long process to verify data and answer the same questions repeatedly and bounce us back and forth between the business side of their house and the customer side of their house, or between their level 1 and level 2 support. This should be transparent to the customer. Once we've described the problem and demonstrated to them that that's the actual problem that exists, the customer or the service provider should believe us and not constantly require us to do the same things over and over again. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and I promise next time we'll have something a bit more interesting.